ccsradio.com. I am already fielding requests to give Josh a redo on the baseball true or false. DA Bob Manzi, you play true or false with Josh every week, don't you?
We listen to the true or false on our way to dropping my kids off to school and see if we can beat Josh.
How'd you do today?
Ooh, I apologize. Today we were 3 for 6.
3 for 6.
We were batting 500.
Yeah, there you go. I think he was 2 for 4 or 2 and 4.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was some tough questions.
All right. Well, speaking of tough questions, there always are a few when you're in the position in which you find yourself as the Indiana County District Attorney. Our conversation this morning with the DA brought to you by Marcus & Mack, voted best personal injury law firm in the Best of Indiana County contest. Marcus & Mack, a law firm representing injured people. Yesterday here on Indiana in the Morning, we welcomed into the studio Jen from the Care Center, or Jess from the Care Center, and Jen from IUP's Haven Project. We were talking Take Back the Night and also the Pinwheels for Prevention planting of the public garden at the Pinwheel Garden at the Indiana County Courthouse coming up on Friday. I know you're concerned as well as we get to April being Sexual Abuse Awareness Month, Child Abuse Awareness Month. These designations are important, aren't they?
They're absolutely important. And even though we have 1 month a year designated for sexual assault awareness and domestic violence awareness, it is an issue we face 365 days a year.
Yeah, absolutely. And they were talking about a couple of events. The planting of the Pinwheel Garden will be on Friday at noon at the courthouse. Take Back the Night is on next Wednesday in the Oak Grove at IUP. That event has been around for a lot of years, and I can think of very few events that are as emotionally charged as that one, because that's where we hear from actual victims about the consequences of what they have suffered because of their own abuse.
Absolutely, and I think that's one of the important parts of that event and any type of work in domestic violence and sexual assault is listening to the victims of those assaults, learning more than what we can. There's an awful lot of times where individuals who don't face domestic violence have honest questions about why do people stay in domestic violence situations, or why don't they report it to the police earlier, or why do they do X, Y, or Z? Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of reasons people have for coming forward or not coming forward or doing what they do. And I think it's very important, especially in our profession, to listen to the victims to see what we can do to help. But, again, we have 2 ears and 1 mouth. We got to use it in that proportion to learn how to better serve those folks.
The importance of groups like the Haven Project and the Care Center as well. They've actually played out in courtrooms here in Indiana County, and recently, too. Very
recently. The Care Center of Indiana County and the Care Center's version in Jefferson County worked very hard in a case. It was a serious case with a defendant who was sexually assaulting his sister. And it took a lot of work. It took about 1.5 years of investigations, forensic interviews, because we're dealing with a very young victim in a very vulnerable situation. And because of the work that they helped in partnership with the state police, we were able to gain a conviction against that defendant, Tyler Stormer, and he's going to spend the next 10 to 20 years in state prison. And that is valuable. That tells our victim, you can live out the rest of your childhood not worrying about him being in the community, nor is he going to have the opportunity to victimize anyone else, at least for the next 10 to 20 years.
The urgency with which those investigations and prosecutions unfold, I know, are magnified by the fact that the longer that person is under investigation and not in a jail cell, the more opportunity is there for that person to commit more abuse. And I know that you have to work quickly, but you also have to work thoroughly to make sure that everything is properly done so that you can ensure that that person isn't able to get back out onto the streets.
And that's the ultimate goal. When we have somebody who's under an investigation, that doesn't mean we're not keeping an eye on them. Maybe we haven't arrested that person. But we've had individuals here in Indiana County that we've investigated for child sexual assaults in the past. And while the arrest took some period of time, we did have that person, and we have people under surveillance that will use some of our technology just to make sure there's not other children being victimized during the pendency of that investigation. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, we want to make sure we do the investigation well, we do it thoroughly, because we want a conviction that's going to stand up. It's going to stand up to any appeals. We're going to be ready for any potential trial, so that when we tell the victim, hey, Tyler Stormer is going to be in jail for 10 to 20 years, we're not turning around in a year saying, whoops, he's out.
Yeah.
We want those convictions to stand, and it's important to do it the right way.
I want to talk about the Alice Paul House in a second, because they certainly play a big role in this. But the Care Center, I want to get back to them for a second, because what they do in terms of protecting a child and making sure that child has to go through the minimum of testifying, of interviewing, all of those things is vitally important.
It's very important, and they do fantastic work. We are so blessed to have the Care Center here in Indiana County. The services they provide, not only do they help by doing forensic interviews as part of an investigation, but they provide services to help the children cope with that trauma. They provide services to help with parenting and supervised visits. They provide services for our children and youth. They are such a value to our county that they're helping families deal with situations. They're helping children cope with that trauma. And it truly helps us as investigators and prosecutors get to a point where by the time a trial comes up, they're ready to go. Those victims are ready to get into court. They've gone through all of the work, and we firmly believe that we're going to be able to get that conviction.
We're with Indiana County District Attorney Bob Manzi this morning. A part of this whole equation for combating sexual assault, abuse of families is the Alice Paul House here in Indiana. Again, long-term organization that's done some wonderful, wonderful work. New facility for them, which is very, very helpful. But they play a key role here too, don't they?
They play a key role. I've said it for years. All of the good things that happen in our criminal justice system happens because we have great partners, and all of us are working together, and that includes the Alice Paul House. You know, not only are they a domestic violence shelter, that is a small proportion of what they do. They're at all of our court hearings. They're at our preliminary hearings in district court. They're at our court of common pleas. They're helping us with victim interviews. They're providing services. There's cases where we may have a victim who does not wish to go forward. And obviously we can't move forward prosecution-wise if a victim's not ready to move forward. They continue to help that victim because maybe that person's not at a point in life where they're ready to fully step away for whatever reason. They continue to provide services to help them address their needs so that they can get to a point in their life where they can step away from their abuser, so they can break that cycle of abuse.
I think that folks might be surprised at definitions of abuse and of assault, but there are very definite definitions of what constitutes abuse or assault. Alice Paul House is certainly a part of helping to define that. From a prosecutorial standpoint, when it rises to criminal, that's where you step in. So let's talk a little bit about for folks, and if they suspect that there is an abuse situation going on, if they suspect that there has been a sexual assault, if they suspect a child is involved, what should they do?
They should immediately call law enforcement. They should not hesitate. Call law enforcement. Maybe that person who's the victim is not ready to step forward, but just having law enforcement coming and begin an investigation might put that suspect, might make him aware that people are watching. It might reduce any further assaults. It might help the victim realize, hey, there's people out there in my life that care about me and are going to support me. Any type of assaultive behavior, a suspect tends to try to pull the victim away from others. When you're calling the police saying, I love you, I don't want you to be assaulted anymore, and I'm going to stand by you, maybe that helps the victim. And what I always say is I've heard people talk about, I don't want to call the police, I don't want to create unnecessary investigation. Maybe it's not. Well, maybe it is an abusive situation. Maybe there's something much worse going on, and you're only seeing a tip of an iceberg. The police have no problem going out to initiate an investigation, and we hope we find out that there's nothing going on. Mm-hmm. We hope we begin an investigation, say, hey, someone had a concern, there's no crime happening, there's no concern, or there's a minor issue we can address and help the family get it addressed through other services. But don't ever hesitate to call law enforcement, because one of the worst things you could have a feeling is, I could have done something, I thought something was going on, I wish I would have. Please call law enforcement immediately and make that report.
Absolutely. And then when you get involved, again, from the prosecutorial standpoint, you'll make sure that you work cooperatively with the police, and their findings will inform you as to how to pursue a case and get it into the court system. And most importantly, we'll get the people who are involved separated so that the abuser no longer has that chance.
Yeah, and that's one of the biggest end goals. You know, a conviction is not always the goal of a prosecution. Sometimes that goal is, okay, we don't get a conviction, but we have a victim that got away from her abuser, and she got to another house, and she's away from him. She doesn't wish to testify. The case is going to go away. That's not necessarily a loss for the prosecution, because we now have a victim who's away from their abuser and doesn't have to deal with them anymore in her life. Mm-hmm. So the main goal is, we don't want future crime and future abuse happening.
Are Pennsylvania's laws having to do with sexual assault, abuse, are they strong enough? And do they also, are they strong enough to prevent recidivism?
You know, I think that's a great question, because I'll see certain people, and I wish that the sentencing guidelines were so much stronger against sexual abusers. You know, our judges are constrained when they do a sentencing to follow what's called the sentencing guidelines that are promulgated through the state. And a lot of times people will hear a sentence and not think it's enough, but they don't recognize that those guidelines are in place and that courts have to use them as guidance. And there's a lot of cases personally that I think the sentencing guidelines should be much stiffer. You know, if you're abusing children, if you're sexually assaulting children, if you're assaulting vulnerable populations, you need to be in jail for a long period of time. That's just my personal feeling. Yeah. You need to be away for a long period of time. And either it's going to stop people from doing it in the first place, and if it's not, it's certainly going to stop you when you're in state prison.
He is Indiana County District Attorney Bob Manzi. Again, if you suspect that there is abuse going on, call your local law enforcement, call 911.
Absolutely.
Very good. Hey, thanks for the visit.
Thank you.
We appreciate that. It is the voice of Indiana County. It's WCCS 101.1 FM, AM 1160, and WCCSradio.com. Just about 25 minutes after 8 o'clock, Jake is in the newsroom. He's coming up in just a moment or so. Right now, the Boomer is here. He's got CBS Sports.